As you all know, we had a problem in 2008 because of too much debt. Well, now the debt is much, much, much higher everywhere in the world. A lot of people have discussed austerity. Nobody has lower debt this year than last, much less than in 2008. And the debt's going higher and higher every day, every week, every month. So this is going to end disastrously when it ends, whether the central banks come to their senses and raise interest rates, which is unlikely, or whether the market finally just says, we're not going to play anymore. We don't want your garbage. You can print all the garbage you want, but we're not going to play anymore. And that, of course, would be the worst disaster, at least if the central banks tried or even could control a change in madness. They might be able to control it. But if the market forces our hand, which is probably what's going to happen, it's going to be the worst economic times we've had in your lifetime and mine. I want to repeat, the next time we have a problem, it's going to be worse than anything you've seen in your lifetime. And I don't care how old you are, it's going to be worse than anything you have seen in your lifetime.
That was investment legend Jim Rogers' opening warning at our sold-out conference in Port Douglas. Little ominous, right? If you've read even a bit of our stuff here at Port Phillip Publishing, however, you're used to ominous. After all, we did name the conference the Great Repression, the battle for your wealth in an age of financial tyranny. It was never going to be sunshine and lollipops. But here's the weird thing. I was shocked by it. What really silenced the 650 attendees while Jim spoke in the pavilion tent at the Sheraton Mirage in Port Douglas was not his dire prediction for 2017. It was something else. It was his tips and strategies for surviving and even potentially making a fortune from what he believes is about to start unfolding next year. We were gobsmacked. I've held several conferences like this before. I've never seen a speaker of Jim Rogers' caliber, not to mention his net worth, divulge such specific knowledge on where he is allocating his money right now. Jim is worth in excess of $300 million. He co-founded the almost mythical Quantum Fund in the 1970s, and later started the famous Rogers International Commodities Index. When this guy opens his portfolio book to give you a quick peek, you'd better take notes. Yes, we learnt in Port Douglas just how bleak Jim's outlook for the global economy is. But we also learned that there are hotspots around the world, and here in Australia, that could start to make investors fantastic wealth even as the world is going to pieces. Here's a sample of what Jim Rogers shared with us on day one of our Great Repression conference. 3 niche areas where Jim Rogers believes stocks will do spectacularly well even if the world ends. These 3 tips alone were worth seeing his presentation for. But there was way more, including one market Jim Rogers just went all in on for 2017 to 2020. He's bulk bought shares, government bonds, and 2 weeks before the conference, the currency itself. Russian and Ukrainian agriculture. If you place one contrarian bet for a massive potential payoff in 2017, make it this one, but not before you've heard Rogers' rationale behind it. If Jim Rogers would give one single Christmas present investment to his grandkids, this would be it. As he explained, 20 years down the track they'll say, "How did you know, grandfather? What a smart old man you must be." One of the great growth industries of our time, by now. The one commodity sector in the world Jim Rogers is most optimistic about, especially in the coming turmoil. How Jim owns his own personal gold and where he stores it. You don't have to be a billionaire hedge fund manager to do the same. Jim Rogers' surprising #1 safe haven to own in 2017. It's not gold. 2017's ticking time bomb market. One country in the world where Jim Rogers doesn't own a single thing. If you do, sell now while you can. It was an intriguing and timely portfolio action plan from the former partner of George Soros. The two co-founded the Quantum Fund in 1973. You can see the speech in full by clicking on the link below this video now. But aside from the actionable tips, Jim Rogers was riveting. As attendee Mitch Conlon writes, Rogers tells a great story, enjoys what he does, comes across as genuine in his convictions, self-deprecating and pretty damn smart. But believe it or not, Rogers didn't even rate in the top 3 presentations at Port Douglas. That's no slur on him. It just gives you an idea of some of the fireworks that were cracking off over the 2 days. Put simply, the Great Repression wildly exceeded all our expectations. All 650 seats sold out. But if you couldn't make it to the Sheraton Mirage in Port Douglas, today is your lucky day. This is your Great Repression highlights reel. You'll hear some startling predictions, some of which are already playing out. You'll also get answers to some forbidden questions. Questions few in the mainstream dare to even ask, like, are you a complete idiot for sticking to either a bullish or bearish view in 2017? And if so, what views should you be adopting with your portfolio? What will Trump world likely look like? How could you possibly make portfolio plans for such a complete wildcard? We held the conference the week leading up to the election, but several presenters, including Jim Rickards, went on the record to say the win wasn't just possible, but probable. Are your retirement savings being responsibly managed by the superannuation industry? And could 2017 reforms cost you thousands in retirement income? Is technology becoming a tool for financial and political repression? If so, is there anything you can do about it? Most important, amid the clouds of uncertainty, where are the bright spots and opportunities with the potential to make you great profits, both short-term and long? You're about to get a glimpse at some concrete investment ideas that emerged, because while a lot of the recent news can make you feel like the world is out of control, you can control what you do with your money. The single goal of the conference was to help you do that, as I said in my opening remarks.
In short, over the next 2 days, I encourage you to listen, to take notes, and most importantly, to think. Think for yourselves. Only thinkers are welcome at this conference. Not drones, not robots, not sheeple, only thinkers. Because if you think carefully about what you hear over the next 2 days, I'm convinced you'll get a great deal out of this conference.
And now, in retrospect, I know we delivered. Look, as we head into 2017, it's more important than ever that you think for yourself, and don't be misled by a media that has never been more out of touch with reality. For instance, what did the big change agent Donald Trump announce when he became the 45th President of the United States of America? That there would be no change at all, and that easy credit, upon which the entire financial system depends, could get even easier. To the easy monetary policy, he will add easy fiscal policy. As much as an additional $1 trillion will be spent on infrastructure, bought on credit, of course. He's not going to postpone the big financial endgame. He's going to hasten it. You need to realise that and prepare for it. That was the message of Jim Rickards' speech at Port Douglas, titled The Coming Collapse of the International Monetary System.
The world is a complex dynamic system. It more closely resembles the chain reaction in the core of a nuclear reactor. Now, you can dial a nuclear reactor up or down, but you better get it right, because if you get it wrong, you'll have a catastrophic meltdown, release radiation, and by the way, that's not reversible. There's no such thing as a melt up. We've seen meltdowns, we've never seen a melt up.
Jim has a funny knack for being in the right place at turning points in history. In 1981, he was involved in the release of 52 US hostages in Iran. In 1998, he was the principal negotiator of the government-sponsored rescue of the collapsed LTCM hedge fund. In the early months of 2009, the Pentagon summoned Jim to the top-secret Applied Physics Weapons Laboratory in Washington to conduct financial war games. And in October 2016, Jim Rickards popped up in Port Douglas. His speech was fascinating for two reasons. First, because he aggressively tipped a Donald Trump win to our 650 attendees days before it actually happened and shocked the world. You should see his prediction. There were open sniggers coming from the audience. I bet they weren't laughing a few days later. But more importantly, Jim explored the anatomy of the coming meltdown, what it will look like, what it will feel like, and how to be prepared for it. Jim bases all his predictions on science, history, and facts, not hunches and certainly not polls. Jim explained that many investors and even people who have cash in the bank are being herded into digital pens and led to the slaughter in 2017. What does he mean by that? You'll have to watch the full speech to find out, but some highlights include an intriguing dinner Rickards had with a gold dealer the week before the conference. All the gold in Switzerland is spoken for. We don't have any more to sell, the dealer had just been told by a Swiss contact. But as you'll see, Jim believes global gold supplies will get even tighter in 2017. Euroshock. Which country is likely to take Britain's place in the EU, probably in 2018? Jim's non-gold punt, a favourite pet play for both income and growth, even during the coming monetary collapse. How the Fed could cause 150% inflation in 15 minutes, but why the biggest financial threat in the next 2 years will not come from the Fed or Donald Trump, but from cyber warfare terrorists. The current price of silver is about $17 an ounce. Jim explains why and how you could see that rise over 5 times. Jim's frank, off-record discussion with Reserve Bank of Australia officials. What was said? Jim also comprehensively destroyed the 4 remaining arguments against holding gold in 2017. I defy you not to add to your gold position after hearing this part of his presentation. Roger Clarnett called Rickards' presentation excellent, very analytical, and I think he gave us a roadmap to where we are going and what we can do personally, given the state of the world. Rick Leeworthy appreciated Jim Rickards' wealth preservation suggestions. Above all, what Jim Rickards showed clearly in Port Douglas was that the world has never been in a situation like this before. No one really knows what 2017 and 2018 has in store. But the consensus is, whatever happens, it's no longer a far-off thing. It's pretty much here. It could be inflation with soaring prices. That would be good for gold, but a nightmare for bonds. Or it could be deflation, great for cash, as long as it's still legal to hold cash and bonds, but not great for stocks and commodities. Which will it be? Who cares, was Sam Volkering's message on day 2 of the conference. Here's how you could make money from your investments in 2017, no matter what happens in the financial markets. The theme of the conference was the Great Repression. But no speaker was duty-bound to agree with this theme, and tech maven and small-cap maestro Sam Volkering staged a spirited rebuttal of the argument that we are all doomed. On the contrary, Sam said 2017 could be one of the most profitable investment years of your life.
So as we said, the Great Repression, battle for your wealth in the age of financial tyranny. I had a bit of a think about that on the way up as I was sitting on the plane up here to Port Douglas and got off on the bus and it was 30 degrees and I was in my shorts and sort of looking around at the beautiful scenery on the way up, and I see you all here today, and again, it's a sunny 30-odd degree day outside. How repressed are you really right now? I mean, is it all that bad? Or are we just telling ourselves that it's all that bad? And I think that's one of the important things, and I think Dan Denning mentioned it yesterday, is by the end of today, and hopefully what I can contribute towards that, is that we can help you weaponize the thing between your ears, your brain, make you more independent thinkers and take action for yourselves and take opportunities that do exist, because opportunities do exist. Even in a Great Repression, financial tyranny, there are opportunities, always opportunities.
Sam's presentation was centered around those opportunities. They are being driven by a new empire, which Sam calls the Mafia. According to Sam, the Mafia is helping to liberate society, and it's creating wealth and opportunity in a certain set of stocks that's never existed in the history of man before. Sam went on to talk about 5 companies that could shape the 21st century in the same way big oil companies shaped the 20th. Sam's single biggest opportunistic short-term tech trend. This is not for the next decade or the next few years. Sam believes this is going to go bananas in 2017, and that, in his words, the investing opportunity is immense. Why Sam believes Bitcoins should reach $50,000, and why he thinks it could be even safer than gold if there's a financial system collapse. The one in vogue stock Sam will never recommend, and why he gets hate mail for it. One sector in computing Sam believes is going to rocket and explode between now and 2020. Why, if you don't have exposure to this one group of stocks right now, he thinks you're insane. Have Google and Facebook had their runs, or are they still must-own stocks for the next 2 decades? Sam's answer is fascinating. One small company, stock name revealed by Sam, currently being backed by the tech superpowers to pull off something quite extraordinary. Attendee Stephen Shorey wrote, "It was great to hear the optimism of Sam Volkering and his faith in the future." Valerie Vaughan wrote that her conference highlight was Sam's positivity. Forward, forward, forward. Thank you from our grandkids and their grandkids. You can view Sam's speech and get all his insights and recommendations by clicking the link below this video box. This link will take you through to a secure form where you can download your complete virtual seat video and audio package of the Great Repression. I'm sorry you couldn't join us in person in Port Douglas, but the next best thing to being there in the pavilion tent is seeing every speaker, every breakout session, every investment recommendation, and every prediction in the comfort of your own home. Or if you download the audio recordings while you go for a walk or drive in the car. You won't miss a second. As well as Sam, Jim Rogers, and Jim Rickards, you'll hear from Port Phillip Publishing's founder, Dan Denning, and 30-year financial market veteran Satyajit Das. Then there's the Pan-Asia investing expert Kim Iskian and Senator David Lionhelm, the first Libertarian member of an Australian Parliament. They are, of course, joined by all our editors, including Vern Gowdie, Greg Canavan, Phil Anderson, Matt Hibbard, and Jason Stevenson. As soon as you click the link below, you'll be directed to an online vault where you can stream the presentations, panel discussions, and breakout sessions at your leisure. Like I said, it's your virtual front row seat. Here's what some other attendees had to say.
Quality of presentations excellent. How often can you attend a conference with such quality people? Lots of valuable information which we can take away. Some great ideas gained. We'll do more research focusing on what I have learnt here and from PPP subscriptions to manage SMSF.
Absolutely fantastic value. Calibre of speakers, diversity of topics and views.
Good coverage of major issues at a macro level and also good range of views in subject areas. It has helped with my overall strategy but encouraged me to be more active with recommendations and advisories.
It fulfilled my belief in PPP that it offers diverse ideas and doesn't simply follow a bias.
Both sides, gloom and doom and positive, were presented clearly. The conference has now made me aware of both possibilities and will affect my decision making more clearly.
That last comment by attendee Graham is an important one. The main point of the Great Repression was to put the microscope over both the bullish and bearish cases in 2017. But in actual fact, one of the most intriguing presentations of the 2 days concluded that you're a complete fool for predicting either outcome. This presentation was by Crisis and Opportunities' Greg Canavan. He pretty much flew in the face of everyone else there, because he staunchly argued that while either outcome, boom or bust, massive inflation or massive deflation, is possible, it's a complete waste of time as an investor to try and predict it. It's Greg's view that we are in no position as individuals to possibly know, and that you will actually vastly improve your investment performance in 2017 if you stop guessing what might happen next and instead invest for what is happening right now.
And so I decided that I thought it might be interesting to make that case in a presentation, is to say, look, what happens if you just put your hand up and say, I've got no idea, but I still want to have a crack at investing, and I still want to see how I can come up with a strategy that can still make money in a market where I've got no idea what's going on. So that's what today's about. It's about sort of going through my strategy.
Embrace your ignorance was Greg's core message at Port Douglas. He says there's no problem with having an intellectual discussion of what things are going to happen in the world, but trying to position your portfolio based on these guesses is a fool's errand and a very big risk. Instead, Greg laid out a very different way to approach investing in these uncertain times. Attendee Adam Davis says Greg's session was excellent as it provided practical ways of investing. Mick Conlon wrote that Greg offered a good personal reflection on bias which set the audience up for day 2. Look, in the scheme of things, there isn't much you can do when global governments and policymakers are hell-bent on destroying any sense of a free market. But that's not the point. There is something you could do with your money. You can analyse the situation and try to prepare for what comes next. As Dan Denning, founder of Port Phillip Publishing, said in his presentation,
as I said, my point was not to say that you need to gather all your possessions, move all your assets, and find a bolt hole. That will not work in what we're facing. But it will work if you start thinking about it with your assets and your money. Where can you put them? How can you diversify so that you're in jurisdictions that are less susceptible to financial repression?
Dan started Port Phillip Publishing in 2005 because, as far as independent financial research goes, Australia was a desert. In case you haven't noticed, almost all the information you get from the Australian media is the product of just 2 companies, Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation or John Fairfax Holdings. That means you're hearing fewer alternative opinions than you'd hear in almost any other place in the free world. Considering you tend to make investing decisions based on what you hear in the media, that's a big problem. This is the whole reason Port Phillip Publishing came to Australia in 2005. To solve this problem, and to be an independent and alternative source of ideas. When I say independent, I mean we answer to no one but our own paying subscribers. There are no advertisers to please, we don't manage money and tack on a fee, and we don't recommend financial products in order to earn a trailing commission, or get paid to write about the companies we recommend. This complete financial independence from everyone except our own readers gives us total editorial independence. And it gave me the opportunity to organise a conference for you that I knew no one else in Australia would dream of or bother to organise. Yet I think you'll see it was one of the most remarkable and valuable investment events ever held here. That's why I put so much time, effort and money into making the Great Repression Conference a reality. To connect with like-minded people who are worried about what's happening in Australia and the world right now, but are willing to front up and do something about it for themselves. But more importantly, for their children and grandchildren. We had every minute, every word, every prediction and every recommendation professionally filmed. Your virtual seat package is available now, and includes an iPod-friendly MP3 file you can download. If you do, you will also hear Australian Senator David Leyonhjelm's speech called "Why the Government is Not Your Friend and Other Truths Canberra and the Bureaucracy Won't Tell You About." Okay, I'll be honest, this was definitely not up there with the top-rated speeches from the survey we did afterwards. You could feel people bristle, which surprised me. But personally, I loved it. I was perhaps the only person clapping at the end. Whether you agree with the senator or not, this is a presentation you must hear. Resource speculator Jason Stevenson's 3 unofficial off-record stock picks for 2017. Dan Denning's great tipping point, where he thinks you'll start seeing overt repression of your money and freedoms over the next 18 months. Options trader Matt Hibbard's no jargon, no BS tutorial on the best ways for private investors to use options in Australia. Don't buy beef and cattle stocks until you know about this overheard ag conference whisper. How to survive the coming ice age, easily the most controversial and contrarian presentation of the conference. The very first thing cycle guru Phil Anderson believes Donald Trump will do when he takes office, because at heart he's a real estate man. Satyajit Das, why China's growth is a complex fraud, and why its eventual exposure could cause shockwaves similar to the 2008 GFC. If you care about these issues and are keen to learn more about the opportunities and dangers your wealth might encounter over the next few years, click the link below to secure your virtual seat. Look, let's be direct. The entire financial system, indeed the entire global economy, is now in the grip of an experiment by academic bankers. And look at the markets. Investors are so confident the Feds will keep the gravy train going, they were back buying stocks again mere hours after Donald Trump's shock election win. The most overwhelming consensus at the Great Repression is that it can't go on forever, and that we are in for some kind of reckoning. I say almost, because you won't find any kind of complete consensus if you claim your virtual seat at the Great Repression. That's the beauty of it. For instance, you'll have cycle guru Phil Anderson enlighten you on the hidden structure of the markets. Phil began with this.
But I think the best thing that can be done is to show you the structure of the economy, which will then allow you to read the system and to understand the system, so that then you can actually have a very good idea about what's coming next. But to do that, we have to get rid of our biases, and we have to try and avoid the opinions. So I happen to think that the world is on the verge of an absolutely massive boom coming. I think, my question to you is, what happens in the next century, this century, if we don't really get it? We'll get some corrections, but what happens if we don't get the major downturn? And this is why I think it's going to happen.
Phil has produced a huge amount of material to prove that there is a land cycle precisely 18.6 years in length. That's 200 years of history in the United States, 300 years of history in the UK, 400 years of history in the Netherlands. If you understand this cycle, according to Phil, you can predict what the property and stock market is going to do here in Australia. At the Great Repression, Phil demonstrated how to do this. Vern Gowdie, chairman of Gowdie Family Wealth, editor of the Gowdie Letter and author of The End of Australia, has been on the Australian financial scene for over a quarter of a century. Attendee Roger Clarnett wrote that Vern was excellent, brings vast experience to the audience and provides sage advice. And Vern's also not afraid to call things as he sees them. Perhaps that's why his presentation was another surprise hit at the Great Repression. So too was the breakout session he did on how to work with your children to manage family wealth. It was packed too. Vern and his daughter Grace didn't disappoint.
So it started off as just that simple kernel of an idea, is that we wanted to build wonderful adults that will lead full and rich lives. Now it's evolved into a family wealth project because we have got a couple of dollars, so therefore they need to know the responsibilities that will come with that. But we've been building this base over a period of time, so we didn't come with inherited money. We're first generation wealth creators, so we're not a second generation. And the more I read is the second generation, 70% of it will fail. You know, it doesn't go across. And I've read so many studies on this because, it's one key element. It's not because the money's gone, it's because the family's gone. Trust is gone, communication is gone. And I've seen that time and time again with wealthy families, is that the bridge hasn't been built and it gets a bit hard later.
The core of Vern and Grace's breakout session was how to make sure that didn't happen. Simple things you can do from a wealth perspective to hold that family nucleus together. So hopefully you can see by now it wasn't all dark clouds and dire predictions in Port Douglas. We want to make sure each and every attendee left with dozens of actionable ideas and insights.
Have sat on our hands learning since semi-retirement. Feel this conference has helped clarify the mind to help us with decision making.
Excellent balance of speakers created a good amount of thought-provoking ideas. The conference gave me information and ideas to act on.
Informative and gave a snapshot of the future. A well-rounded, informative conference. I've walked away from this experience possibly better for being present at the event.
Never been exposed to such a think tank in this area. I'm a newbie in investment area and totally appreciated the dynamic exposure of being asked to think for yourself.
So you really should order your virtual seat now. If you only get one or two ideas that prompt you to think differently about the way you invest in 2017, then it's definitely worth the small cost, a tiny fraction of the full ticket price. In my opening remarks, I warned attendees that we would be covering uncomfortable, even dangerous territory. As you can see, I wasn't wrong. You won't miss a single word, prediction, or actionable idea, not just from our heavy hitter keynote speakers, but from every Port Phillip Publishing editor you know and follow. But that's not even the best part. Where attendees really got stuck in was at the breakout sessions, like the one we just covered with Vern and Grace. This is where our experts spent the second half of day 2 drilling down to actual strategies, plans, and recommendations. Claim your virtual seat now, and you'll be as good as having been in the room at breakout session 1, How to Pick Stocks When You Don't Know How, with Greg Canavan. This was a think tank based on a simple premise. How do you make sound investments when you just don't know what the hell is going on in the financial markets these days?
And so I decided that I thought it might be interesting to make that case in a presentation, is to say, look, what happens if you just put your hand up and say, I've got no idea, but I still want to have a crack at investing and I still want to see how I can come up with a strategy that can still make money in a market where I've got no idea what's going on. So that's what today's about. It's about sort of going through my strategy.
Breakout session 2, Putting Options to Work, How to Use Options to Generate Income, with Matt Hibbard. Much is made about the ability to use options to leverage massive potential capital gains. Few people know, though, that they could also be used to generate regular income. Matt walks you through that in this session. And just like his earlier presentation, you'll find this a jargon-free zone. No deltas or gammas, butterflies or straddles. Then there's Breakout Session 3, Targeting Australia's Next Resources Boom, with Jason Stevenson. Breakout Session 4, How You Can Profit from Future Trends, with Sam Volkering. Breakout Session 5, The Grand Cycle and Why It Affects Every Investment, with Phil Anderson. And Breakout Session 6, Q&A on Family Wealth, with Vern and Grace Gowdie, which we've already covered. So, a lot of ideas for our attendees to process over the course of just 2 days. But the beauty of claiming a virtual seat is you can work through everything at your leisure. You get every idea shared, every good and bad scenario discussed, every bomb hurled by James Rickards, every investment talked about. It's all there in video, transcribed, to read, or if you prefer, listen to in audio format. You can watch the show at your leisure. Pause, rewind, take notes, make plans. So, how much will a virtual seat cost you? Well, I'll tell you what a real seat would have cost you. $949. That's right. Attendees paid nearly $1,000 to be in that tent in the Sheraton Mirage in Port Douglas. There wasn't a seat left in the place, and I believe it was worth every cent. But the virtual seat will cost you far, far less. There are several options depending on what you're after. Here's the deal. You can get the transcript only for $49. Audio only is $99. Video only is $149, and the full virtual seat package, which includes all three, is $199. To be honest, I'd take the full bundle. That way you can consume at your leisure, reading in bed at night, watching on your PC when you get a minute, listening on your phone on a walk. Also, the video means you can see all the visuals of the presentation, but it's up to you. I know a lot of people consume most of their information through earphones these days, so if that's you, just go for the MP3 audio. Up to you. Any way you cut it though, even the full package at just $199 is a tiny fraction of the full $949 ticket price. It's a brilliant deal, and I sincerely believe nothing could set you up better as an investor for the uncertain and, let's be honest, surreal times we have ahead of us between now and the close of this decade. These will be exciting times. There will be great opportunities, but there will also be great dangers. As Port Phillip founder Dan Denning pointed out, quoting REM,
Yes, it is the end of the world as we know it. But that was a bad day for the dinosaurs. It was a great day for mammals, though. The world changed irrevocably for mammals, and the one evolutionary advantage mammals had when that meteor hit the planet was they had the capacity for independent thought. And that independent thought allowed them to separate themselves from events and make decisions for themselves. So the biggest asset you have is right between your ears. And by being in the room for the next 2 days, I think you have a chance to, you've invested in that capital, and I hope that you get some excellent ideas. Don't be too stoic about it, though, because that day is coming.
But you now don't have to be in that tent in Port Douglas to get all these ideas. And I can promise you that when you take your virtual seat, you won't find a more thought-provoking, entertaining, and useful investment event anywhere this decade. So don't delay. Do it. You won't regret it. Click the link below. Thanks for watching. And if you're still on the fence, here are some more testimonials from those who got one of the physical 650 seats up in far north Queensland.
Incredible value for money. No expense spared for the delegates. All presenters were excellent. Fabulous knowledge shared.
DAS, always entertaining and a good balance of statistical analysis, storytelling, and subtle but important warnings. Great info to challenge our own preconceived ideas. That not one person can guarantee what is going to happen, but be prepared and have a plan for different scenarios.
It was faultless and thought-provoking. To see commentators I respect in real life and be able to ask specific questions. Broad range of excellent presenters. For me, it was a cognitive experience, not just a tip-gathering venture.
Speakers are world-class, easy to understand.
I would come back tomorrow. The fact that there was a diversity of speakers just means greater room for personal thought.
To have such high speakers, local and abroad, talk about the current events happening today was a fantastic insight and reconfirmed my thoughts of where we could be headed in the future.
Great value. Good to hear a range of views from experts and participants. It makes one rethink their bias to investing. I liked the diversity of the conference. I've learnt that for your money to grow, you need to understand what or where you are investing and understand the market.
Made me think how I can help my children more and help them prepare.